Well, I've been waiting to do this, so let's get started. I've looked at a lot of countdown lists on the Mega Man X series, and I see a lot of talk about the Mavericks and how they are fared from worst to best. But that got me thinking, what about the villains, the antagonists that you encounter in the game? And they don't get talked about a lot. So I decided to go in and start ranking a few of the villains from worst to best. These villains will be ranked by their personality, their backstory, what they got to offer, their boss fights, any potential of them that could lead them to be at least good villains. But you already know that the plots are taken over by you-know-who. Now, what are the rules in terms of ranking these characters? Well, for one, I'm not going to include villains from Command Mission or Extreme games. Mainly because 1, I haven't played Command Mission, and 2, Extreme is non-canon. And even if I were to talk about them, I would only talk about the villains for 5 seconds before moving on. And besides, their boss fights just kinda suck, so of course they're not gonna get any higher in terms of quality during their fights. 2, I had a hard time deciding a few of the characters, like including Hymax, Copy Sigma, into the list. But I decided to say, screw it, I'll just add them in anyway, because they kind of matter to the plot, even though they have very little to mention. But at least I'll have some more other characters to mention up in the list. 3, I'm only going to be ranking in these fights, and all of their fights will be combined in 1. 4, only one Sigma fight is getting talked about. Every other Sigma fight is not getting added because we'll be here for quite some time, and honestly, I'm just on par with most of the fights in the series. And 5, no Zero fights. Zero doesn't really count as a villain, not even Nightmare Zero, so all the Zero fights are banned. Sorry Zero, as much as I want to talk about you, yeah, your fights don't really matter. And I won't be including Iris from X4 in there because she isn't really a villain, she's just part of the game. But she doesn't really count considering she does have a boss fight, so rip her, I guess. Well, further, and also no Magma Dragoon. I know Magma Dragoon is part of relevance to the plot and a villain, but I've already talked positive about him in my Maverick ranking, so you can go check that out. Besides, I got other candidates to talk about. He would have easily been around number 2 or 3. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the ranking. And the reward for the worst Mega Man X villain of all time goes to... He hated him. Well, expecting Gate, were you? But honestly, disappointing. Red deserves to be hated on. He is the most incompetent and pointless villain ever to be seen. Due to the game's poor writing and story, Red barely feels like an antagonist that is handled well in this game. But that's how it went. What's the whole history about him? Well, Red formed up a group called Red Alert, creative name am I right, to try to do the work of dispatching Maverick since the Maverick Hunters are now off duty due to X being a wuss and just giving up completely. Seriously, he says he has enough violence, meaning that he's completely done, despite the fact that he went through all that war because of violence. But that's how it all started off. But Red contacted the X-Hunters, the Maverick Hunters, to demand them for Axel because Axel left them so he can become a hunter on his own. But instead of completely demanding them or figuring something out, instead, what do we result in? A gang war. How original. A gang war. That's the whole plot. You go through all the Mavericks because of a gang war. Then there are the cutscenes involving around Red, which are very confusing and just ridiculous. Due to the fact that these cutscenes, we have no idea where they take place, is before or after the whole entire story, because it just makes no sense. It's all about Red working alongside the Professor to try to work out some deals and make sure progress is going smoothly well and very working. But it just doesn't really work because Red has made some progress, very good progress on the work, and Red Axel left because he wanted him to grow up. But due to the professor, which is by the way Sigma, because look at this, the game doesn't even try to hide the fact that it's someone else. This is almost as pitiful as Mr. X being disguised as Dr. Wily. That's so sad. And due to Sigma over here pulling the strings and being behind everything, he made Red do all that contact, forced the Maverick Hunters to try to fight all of the other Mavericks, and basically go through all of this. That makes Red completely pointless because he barely starts off as a villain to begin with. But then, there's his boss fight. His boss fight. You thought Gate was bad? Well, that's until I fought Red and discovered this annoying, frustrating fight. For starters, look at the arena. What is this? How is this a good arena design? As for the fight itself, all Red does is send out clones of himself to throw sights, and he will send out a projectile attack every time you attack him. This projectile attack is annoying to dodge because of how quick it comes out, making this infuriating and annoying to try to go through. Once he reaches half health, he'll bring out electricity tornadoes that could knock you off the arena, resulting you in instant death. Then, he will teleport around the arena saying over here every single time, and send out his clones to keep pelting you with more sights. This boss fight is tedious and annoying, and due to the awful camera angle, which by the way, you can turn the camera, because yeah, the game told you that despite the fact that you never had the option to turn the camera. This makes it one boring, infuriating, and annoying boss fight. It feels so insulting to even put him on the list because he barely feels like a villain. But sadly, that's just the case with this. And we are just getting started.
I'm done. Good job.
You already knew he was going to be very low on the list, so let's get into ripping him apart. So, what's the deal with Gate in X6? Well, at the start of the game, he was a normal scientist who helped Elia on projects and really shows his effort. But at the start of X6, he found piece of Zero, which is somehow kind of confusing to figure it out, and he wants to get the understanding about this after the crash in X5. But then he becomes infected with the nightmare virus, making him go all crazy and insane, and basically hates everyone because they don't appreciate his work, kind of like Wily. He barely does a lot in the game, and he sends out his nightmare investigators to try to gather up all of the nightmares. The Mavericks that you encounter were brought back from the dead because of Gate and be forced to do all of this. They still remember their past history and what their roles are, but that's basically all there is to it. And Gate himself would seem like an interesting villain considering what his purpose is, but honestly, it just doesn't really seem that interesting since it's just a copy-paste of Wily's plot and history about him. So yeah, Gate just serves no purpose, and due to the confusing story of the game, it makes it hard to try to understand. But then, there's his boss fight. I've ranted about this fight being so bad in my least favorite bosses list. But honestly, I'll just have to bash on it again because, you know, it's a different ranking list. His fight is infuriating. He'll send out orbs to try to attack you. His platforming and arena is just poorly designed and not well made. You can't even damage him. He becomes a waiting game. And basically, this boss fight is just tedious and boring. However, what makes Gate slightly better than Red is that his fight is annoying, but it's not as frustrating as Red, and he does have a little bit more backstory and history about him in terms of being related to the plot. game may have that going for him, but still, I really don't care for this guy. Even after beating him, it's revealed that he brings Sigma back from the dead and gets killed by Sigma. Yeah, all of that just to die. What a wasted potential of a villain that has a horrible fight. Don't worry, we'll get rid of some of the worst candidates now, I promise. Oh look, another villain from X6, yet again. Hymax sucks. For one, I really don't like this guy. I'll give him this, his design is kinda cool looking and definitely more imposing. And there is history about this character. He was built by Isaac over here to be a new replacement figure of Zero, like an upgrade of sorts. Yeah, since Isaac is a body resemblance of Wily, same with Serges, we'll get to him later. But that's kind of all there is to Hymax. There really isn't much to say. He is part of the investigation as well, by resolving the fact that Nightmare Zero exists and wants to put an end to him, since Isaac is sending out false accusations and claims about his entire plot point, which really should be understandable that a lot of people wouldn't need to follow him. And then there's his boss fights. Hymax is built to be a much more strong and durable machine, but sheesh, he floats around all of the arena, he brings up a barrier, he sends out same repeated attacks. The only way to damage him is by hitting him with a special weapon and then damaging him. And the only way you would even know that is by sending out a fully charged up Buster Shot just to try to hit him with a special weapon. It's just tedious and boring. You can easily exploit him with Zero. Honestly, this character just sucks. And there's not a lot good about X6 or its villains at all. In fact, I don't even care for most of the bosses in the game. It's ridiculous that they made most of the Maverick bosses easy, but yet they made the villain bosses hard. Except for Sigma. Wow. Well, time to get into the first X-Hunter from X2 on the list. Violen. And honestly, I don't care for this guy. This guy just sucks because he's a complete thunderhead. He serves as part of the generals for Sigma as like the other X-Hunters, and they want to make it personal with our hero X because after the defeat of Sigma, the X-Hunters managed to gather up body parts of Zero so that way they can use him and rebuild him. You can see how that goes because only one of them knows how to rebuild Sigma completely. And you can take a wild guess who. Anyway, these guys will serve themselves as different bosses you encounter in the stages if you find their secret hidden rooms. And Violen's fight is just awful to deal with. This guy only has 2 attacks. His spike ball flail attack is easily the most annoying. It does so much damage, it flails around everywhere, trying to no damage him becomes a chore to deal with, and it just makes him one of the most annoying fights to deal with. His charged up like projectile shots might as well not even exist anyway. All they do is just try to shoot in different angles, but they're very easy to dodge. So basically this fight is just tedious and boring to deal with. And no damage runners hate him so much. There's a second fight in the fortress stage, and by the way, this fight is a little bit easier since he spawns in 2 of these little tiny blocks that can block his flail and make sure that it doesn't hit you. This fight is just annoying to deal with. And honestly, the X-Hunters I feel like deserve to have much better fights, but due to X2 being rushed out, it seems like this is what they had to do with this guy. And honestly, I just want this idiot out of my way. Well, it was hard for me to decide whether this guy counts or not, but I just decided to add him. Copy Sigma isn't really that fun to fight against. But what's the dealio with Sigma entirely? Well, in terms of the copies, everyone mentions about the copy built-in chips inside of all these different robots. It's due to the Jacobs project, which we'll get into later for a certain other character. These chips would build completely so that way they can mimic off of characters, so it can make them identify themselves as someone else. They can mimic any type of bodies, become the character that they aren't supposed to be, and these chips really work out well. But Copy Sigma is built in to pretend to be the actual Sigma so he can try to rally up the heroes to force them to fight him. So we traverse all the way from the Jacob Project elevator all the way to the moon, go through an annoying boss rush, and fight this boss. And honestly, he's just kind of annoying to fight against. What's his fight like? He'll try to charge towards you and send out his saber, and he has a charge-up attack with a projectile that you have to interrupt with charge-up attacks, or else it's gonna block up the entire whole spot and make it hard to dodge. In fact, you can't even dodge it. Once he hits at certain points of health, he'll send out barrages of missiles that go into different projectile directions, which does make it slightly more annoying, but once he hits to half or low health, he'll basically set the floor on fire, meaning that you'll be stuck on those walls, or he charges towards you with his saber and sends out rockets, making it hard to damage him. Unless you brought Axel with you, you're basically gonna have a hard time with this fight unless you cheese him with your power-up abilities. This doesn't really make the fight fun or enjoyable, especially with how the arena is handicapping you due to the frickin' fire. Honestly, this guy wasn't really that fun, but the others have no redeemable quality, which puts Copy Sigma slightly more higher than the others. But then again, he's just not really something special I want to waste my time on. From one annoying, frustrating boss to another, Blight just sucks. I'm not a huge fan of this guy. He's one of the nightmare police that serves alongside Doppler and helping him make some arrangements with the Maverick Hunters, bring him in alive or dead. So they go on their mission and wait for you at a certain part of the stage to confront them. But Blight here, oh my gosh, this guy's fight just sucks in general. All he does is just throws a projectile that is used as a magnet to pull you closer to him so that way he can charge at you and just punch you. Yep, that's all he does. It's a predictable, easy, boring boss pattern. Just like most of X3's bosses, they have an obsession with doing nothing but charge towards you. Come on, at least put some effort. This bucket of balls couldn't even lift his own weight if he wanted to. This is all he does, charge towards you and then tries to punch you. It's a simple, predictable pattern. How did this guy even get hired if his pattern is easy and not fun to figure out? Well, at least he's the other Nightmare Police. He's investigator, put up much more of a fight. Same with the Mad Doctor himself. Wow, one of the X4 villains managed to be very low. General is described as by one word: wasted potential. For starters, what's this guy's history? He's the leader of the entire Rebel force and leading out his army. Apparently, he was making deals by you-know-who to resort some arrangements. A new utopia for all the Reploids. He denied the offer, but little did he know this was gonna lead to something even worse. General now is fed up with this because he's now deemed as a maverick like all the other characters in the game, and gathers up his troops to fight for his own rights, his own independence. They don't believe in the fact that they are responsible for this and were accused to be wrong. So General gathers up his army to get some payback on humanity because they are wrong about him. Even though that's the truth, they aren't responsible for Sky Lagoon falling. They tried to be a part of the investigation, but that just led to them being pinned and blamed on because of what happened. General himself has prepared up a giant satellite machine called the Final Weapon. Creative name, am I right? So that way he can use it to wipe out all of the people and prove his innocence, and showing that he's more and willing to be a threat. Cool backstory and history about him that really shows his potential as a villain in the game. However, his boss fight brought him this low. For one thing, his fight is just too easy and boring. All he does is send out his fist, not even try to charge at you with his fist, and shoot out easy projectiles. He'll try to dive at you and fly around, but this guy's attack pattern is just predictable, easy, and boring. For someone who's the leader of the Repla Force, he puts up a mediocre fight. How sad can that be? Like, sheesh, what happened to you, dude? So sadly, he ends up being very low. It's a shame that somehow Colonel puts up more of a fight than General. It honestly makes me wish that General was the final boss of the game instead of Sigma, of course. But that's just the way it is. Such a shame. Wasted potential. That's right here. Well, here's the slightly above average character for X2. Serges is kind of exists. But honestly, he does have a good history since he's supposed to be a close resemblance to Dr. Wily, since he knows how to build Zero completely with the Zero parts. This guy, however, has an fight. I'm not really a huge fan of this fight. The first fight, however, is kind of okay. He will float on this little platform and send out these mines when he's sitting still, puts up a barrier to make sure that you don't try to damage him, and every time you damage him, he does that spinny circle projectile attack, which is a little bit more challenging to avoid, but still pretty easy. He puts up an alright fight, but however, I just wasn't really feeling this fight. It just wasn't really that exciting. His second fight, however, I hate. Not as much as Violen, but jeez, this fight sucks. Now Serges is in a tank that shoots out different projectiles, and if you saved up your charged up X power, you can be able to wipe out all the cannons and move on to phase 2. This, however, yeah, it's pretty easy to avoid the projectiles since Serges will only sit on a certain cannon that will shoot different projectiles that will explode into multiple different shots. Then for phase 2, he repeats the same thing, except this phase is just annoying. Trying to damage him is a pain and annoyance to try to do, since all he does is zip around, and the only way to damage him in this one exploit spot is by having the charged up Sonic Slicer in order to hit him. Trying to do it normally, it's hard due to how small the hitbox is to hit him completely is, and it just makes this fight really tedious and unfun. Not the worst fight in the game, but honestly, I just really don't care for Serges at all, so that's why he's below average, not even close to cutting with the other characters. Well, here's the Mad Doctor himself. Doppler is decent, to say the least. First of all, what's his history? He was just a normal scientist who was friends with Dr. Kane, and definitely had lived his own life and finding a cure to get rid of the Maverick virus that is happening around the world. Later on, while he was trying to fix it, it infected him, making him go Maverick as well. Soon it spread onto every single other robot, even the creations that he made. The new plants that were made to kill all the Mavericks didn't really work, and more of them were appearing, meaning that robots were going on a rampage, and basically another war. Doppler himself even sent out an entire army to take care of the Maverick Hunter base while it was getting attacked. So yeah, he definitely planned ahead of himself. In fact, there's more about him showing in a cutscene on the PlayStation 1 version where he's rebuilding a body of Sigma because Sigma is coming back as a virus. Well, it really shows how much they put into the PS1 cinematics. Sadly though, his fight kinda brought him down a little bit on the list. All he does in this fight is send out 3 projectiles and charge towards you. But he has a gimmick. If you try to attack him, he'll absorb all that damage you've done to him and regenerate his health. However though, it is a pretty predictable boss pattern, and once you get the hang of it, he isn't really that bad. In fact, he's probably the only boss aside from another boss in X3 that is actually decent, to say the least. But don't worry, we'll get to him soon and later on after the next candidate. Well, it's surprising to see the only X-Hunter that I care for and put a little bit higher. Agile is alright for the most part. What's his game? Well, he's one of the generals that helps out in Sigma's rebellion, and is the one that has the 0 parts that you need in order to save yourself the trouble of fighting 0 at the end of the game. Which, yeah. But this guy is all about speed. He will send out different projectile attacks that depends on your position and try to dash towards you if you're on the ground. Basically, you just gotta be quick with this guy. The only issue I have is that his fight is pretty predictable in terms of a pattern, and he's really easy to deal with. Just not really that hard. His second fight is weird? First of all, what is that design of him? Yeah, like, the other guys didn't get much changes. Violen and Serges remain the same, although Serges has a tank. But Agile, what is this? What exactly were they going for him? It shows that they rushed out the game and didn't have enough time to plan for this guy. However, the fight itself is average as well, since all he does is try to send out different projectiles and you have to use the magnet mine in order to damage him. It's simple, but I just don't know what to say. Just, what exactly am I looking at? He's just an average villain with average fights. That's all I can say about Agile. At least he's fine enough where he is. At least he's fine enough where he is. Here's the Nightmare Police that's placed a little bit higher than his brother. Bit is pretty good, Hurt himself. I already went over about the Nightmare Police history where they are sent to kill X, but you know, that's how it is with both of these characters. There's just not a lot to say about their backstory. The fight, however, is challenging but kinda fun. Bit will try to charge towards you while sending out rings that will immobilize you and a projectile attack that will be tricky to dodge and hard to move around. Bit himself will repeat this pattern. He's pretty fast, just like Agile, and that's what makes him a little bit more exciting, since he has new attacks to the table more than Blight, but still is decent enough. You're probably wondering where the true form of the fight is. Well, here it is. The fight itself was hard for me to rank since I had to rank the 2 separate characters, but the true fight is okay. The design is a bit silly looking, but it is pretty easy, however. It does have some cool attacks, but just kinda too easy. Still better than the trash compactor boss you encounter in this stage. The only way to get access to this fight is by not killing Bit and Blight with their weakness weapons. Still solid overall, just wish there was a little bit more to him. How surprising that a colonel managed to surpass a general in terms of being a good villain. Well, that's just the case. Colonel himself pledges allegiance upon the colonel's word about what they think of the Reaper Force, and he follows them completely. They have no choice but to fight because they refuse to fight. Colonel himself will refuse to let up. His independence matters more. The rebellion, the whole entire thing must continue. They false accuse them for being mavericks. In the end, they aren't even really mavericks. And that's what makes Colonel stand out. He refuses to believe this, refuses to put down his weapons, and continues to fight. He believes that what he's fighting is right. And all because of one incident. Now, how's his fights? In X story, you get to fight him twice, while in Zero story, you only get to fight him once. Why is that? I'll explain. For the X side of story, you have to confront Colonel and in one place, Memorial City, a little palace city right here. And Colonel himself does put up a good fight. He tries to swipe at you, teleport around, send out different projectiles. He's very fast and quick, and you have to be sure to dodge all of these Blight attacks. He is very aggressive and knows what he's doing with that Blight of his. In the second fight, he brings in an extra attack of electricity, somehow with his blade. His attack patterns remain the same, but he's definitely fun to fight against. My problem with Colonel is that he's just too easy. I wanted to like this guy, his fights are fun, but easy. That's what brings him down. However, between him and Zero, it's personal business. He's over here wanting to protect his sister Iris from any harm and destruction, but due to this whole entire incident and false accusations, they really can't trust each other, which makes them bitter rivals. In the cutscene where you're supposed to fight him, it shows that they really don't want to do this, but they have to do this in terms of fighting. But Iris got in the way, and he knows that he doesn't want to upset his sister. Yeah, that really shows right there. But you'll still have to fight him in the second fight. This fight itself is the same as before with X story, but it is a little bit more funner with Zero and can be quite a challenge since you gotta be up and close. With X, it's easy, just keep distance from him. Although I do have to love these fights, and they offer a lot of history because Colonel himself is a really in-depth character. It really shows the relation between him and what he's truly fighting for. It just sucks that the easy boss fights kind of bring him down. And overall, we definitely got much better villain bosses to look at later on. Still good effort though, Colonel. Got much...
It's me. Those hunters must not be allowed in here. Terminate them!
Roger. What a freak.
Hey, Double! What's the matter?
Would have expected betrayal in a Mega Man game. Double is a really good character for a betrayal and a secret agent. First of all, this guy has been seen in your game as a navigator. He's helping alongside the Maverick Hunters to search for the other Mavericks as well. But little do you know is once you reach to the final stages, it's revealed that he is not on your side. He's a secret agent working with you-know-who. Ain't it obvious? And I just want to say his new true body design is cool looking. Love the color palette, love the way it looks. It gives off a menacing look to this character. It really shows he means business. And it's just crazy how you have a secret agent named Double who is going to betray you in the end of the game, since he's part of the manipulation of the Repro Force and this whole entire cause. However, his fight is pretty good, but it's not as challenging as most of the villain fights in X4, honestly. His fight is he will bring out an evil slash, yeah, he calls his attacks out by his name, then he'll send out different projectile attacks like these orbs that will lock onto your location, and these wave attacks which, what's with these bosses having this attack? I don't get it. He overall puts up a really good and fun fight. great. It's just that the fight itself does lack some challenge. But then again, that's my issue with X4. They put the effort of having the strongest lineup of Mavericks, yet the villain bosses are just kind of weaker. But still, they're all not that terrible. They're at least very solid. So good effort though, Double. Definitely deserve to be higher up on the ranking. Weak. Finally, I've been waiting to talk about this one character for a long time, that I forgot to add him onto the other list. But now, I finally get the chance to talk about him. Dynamo. Oh boy, I really love this character so much. For one thing, he shows up out of nowhere with no history or origins about himself, but at the start of X5, it really shows that he's very loyal to Sigma, completely. He knows what he's doing. But the whole entire game, he isn't really there to try to stop you, more to just annoy you, because he's treating this like a game. It's a sport that he enjoys having fun with. He definitely does mean business when he shows up and just wants to annoy you. Jeez, this guy definitely has nothing else better to do. This is really great. Something different from most of the villains. And as for his fight is just great. It's really fun. He will send out boomerang attacks that will try to mess with you, throw in a saber attack that is a bit tricky to dodge, then cause electricity around the room, can block your projectile shots. It's just loads of fun, pretty challenging and fast paced. This is why I wish X4 did with Colonel. This fight is just something, and even after beating him, he's just like, and he just goes away. But he comes back for round 2. He definitely amps up the attacks and comes in more serious. He really wants to see your potential. This guy is not messing around, and he's one of the bosses that I love fighting against. I should have made him my number 3. He's my personal favorite fight in the series. And funny enough, he shows up in X6. And he's the only boss, aside from Nightmare Zero, that is great. He does ample up his attacks and bring in a new one where he tosses in 4 boomerangs that will stay in place depending on your location. This is a really challenging boss, and the only way to encounter him is by going back through the stages after beating the Mavericks. I really love Dynamo. He is one of the best fights in the series. Easily up there. Sucks we don't get to see him again, but you know, that's how it goes. But if I like him so much, how come he isn't any higher? Well, I just like some of the other villains much more higher better. Simple as that. But still, he's a great lad, and I definitely applaud him for these awesome fights. Heck yeah. Well, Sigma only made it to the top 3, and to be honest, you're gonna see why. Sigma himself is a very interesting character with a huge history and story lore behind him. Showcasing this animation right here, Sigma was once a loyal commander and leader of the Maverick Hunters. He knows what he was doing. He was helping out with the cause of the Mavericks and trying to handle all the problems, while also teaching X his ways of how to be much better and not holding back. There's a lot to this character that really shows he cares for his troops, and he's always right by their side as a leading commander of his entire army. He definitely knows how to get the job done. But all that change was due to the history of him first meeting Zero. You see, Sigma was never the bad guy at the start of the series until he confronted Zero, where he was completely evil at that time. This really shows the dynamic change in the series, because this was the starting history of discovering Zero's origins, learning about his backstory if you play Mega Man X4, to see the full story and history behind all of this. In the end, Sigma nearly lost to this guy, but due to Zero's malfunction in his helmet, Sigma was able to do the 1 KO punch to his face and completely bodied him. Yep, really shows right there. Then Sigma comes back out, not feeling well, and wants to bring the robot in for research to see what is up. Only to never realize that he was going to become infected and become a maverick. He began his war to rage across the worlds and started up his own rebellion where he has everyone to join by his side. Even convinced all the people that worked alongside the Maverick Hunters to be on his rebellion. This is for world domination, and you go through an entire adventure to finally confront the madman himself. Just witness the entire destruction that he brought upon the world, and later got passed down in other games. As for his boss fight, he will send out his dog Velgarder to try to dispatch you. The dog itself is pretty easy and not really that tough to take care of, even with his weakness weapon. It may seem like a tough, but this is your starting challenge, so overall, nothing too bad. Now Sigma is not really happy, pulls out his lightsaber, and now is ready to face you completely head on. He will try to slash at you, send out projectile fire, and even can block off your shots, and jump on the walls. It depends on how you proceed on this fight. This first phase is pretty tough, but manageable to deal with, and it really shows that Sigma is quick on his feet. But you've gotten this far, so you're ready to bring down the madman himself. But even after destroying him completely, his head remains on the floor somehow, and reattaches to a giant wall in the background, a giant wolf-like figure, and he takes possession of it. This wolf figure is one of the most challenging final bosses I've faced, but it's one of my personal favorite bosses in the series. Wolf Sigma will breathe out fire, cause out electricity from his hands, use them to try to hit you, and even send out different projectile shots. You have to stand on the position of the hands to try to do damage to him. This is a really challenging and fun final battle, and I really enjoyed the end of X1. As for the other fights in the X series, well, I'm not going to be talking about those, but most of them have been either pretty mediocre or annoying to deal with. But honestly, this first fight is definitely the best of the series. But the last two villains definitely offer a lot more better stuff than Sigma. Still, Sigma is one of the good villains of the series. Just wish Capcom didn't reuse him as the final boss in nearly every game. And here we get introduced to the first ever villain of the series, Violen. He brings out his fully equipped mech, ready to confront you at the start of X1. This is his first introduction to the series, and he does a good first impression. You have to lose to his fight because there's no way you stand a chance since his mech is too overpowered. Even then, I don't think you can ever win against this mech. Even after getting saved by Zero, he retreats off and you'll be ready to confront him again. Now you finally confront him again, but this time he has Zero captive in the first fortress stage. So you think with all of your powers you can finally defeat him, right? Well, no. His armored mech carrier is much more stronger, but it's still the same. So there's no way to stand a chance against this part. Anyway, you have to be forced to lose against him again. So, yeah. Even after all of that, Zero breaks out and self-destructs the mech completely. Because, you know, he's not through with him yet. Now this time, it's personal. You're finally ready to take him on for good. He does bring out his own arsenal with his own fire attacks, trying to charge towards you, and even, like, doing a lot of different attacks, but overall, this fight is just a bit too easy for a first encounter. But overall, it's a decent start. You're overpowered enough to wreck him completely, so Vile doesn't stand a chance. There isn't a lot to say about him in X1, but then there's Maverick Hunter Remake. This remake allows you to play as Vile and get more understanding about his history and story, and overall gives him much more of a personality. Seriously, when is the last time a game has looked at what you played as a bad guy? You are ready to witness what his whole entire story is. He even has his own dialogues and boss fights against X and Zero, and even has dialogues for the other Mavericks. He's drawn into this rebellion to prove that he is the strongest soldier ever. He doesn't even care about all of this. He wants to prove that he's much more capable of taking on X, which is shown to you right now. Overall, his boss fight is the same as the original, but still really good that the remake managed to give him a little bit more personality. But even after his untimely demise, we get to see a mysterious Maverick. What? We know who that is! You're not fooling us, Capcom. This is a failed mistake right here, because Vile has been brought back with new enhancements from Dr. Doppler, but it just doesn't make any sense why they need to make it mysterious when it's obvious that it's Vile. Anyway, he's back for revenge. So you get to confront him in one of his own stages with his own stage music, and he is back ready for some revenge. As for his mech, well, just watch the footage and you'll just see for yourself that it's pretty predictable. Then after kicking him out of his mech, he has only 2 attacks for this fight, shooting off projectiles and a wave of fire. It's pretty easy and predictable, but it's definitely solid to avoid his attacks, and kind of really nothing special for the first fight. But then we get to his second fight, where he brings out different projectiles and a new upgrade Goliath mech that will charge at you from across the distance and even shoots projectiles. Overall, the mech is still the same, but it's definitely nice to see that the mech actually has some new attacks over the previous version. Then after kicking him out, this is where the fight gets really good. He does have the same shots attacks and fire attacks, but he does add some new attacks like bringing electricity that could immobilize you and can even grab you at that point. Overall, he's definitely one of the best bosses in X3, and that is something to be good at, considering that most of the bosses in X3 are kind of underwhelming to say the least. But even after that untimely demise in X3, we finally get to see him again in X8, with his own dialogue and own secret encounters in the game, and even his own special boss fights. As for his normal encounters, well, he'll just try to fly towards you and send out projectile shots that is pretty easy to avoid, but then again, it's his first encounter, so he's just starting off a little easy for you before you get into the actual fun of the fight. Now this time, he brings in more spread fire shots and is very serious about this, so it's going to require good dodging to avoid all of these different barrages of projectiles. But after getting him to half health, he brings out a stray of electricity where you have to avoid them completely. This attack is pretty tough, but not too frustrating. At least that's the fair thing he has. I really like this fight and what they did for Vile in this game. It's really appreciated. Now, you have his final encounter. Yeah, he refuses to die in this game, where he brings out his own ride armor. But he doesn't even bother sitting in it like in the previous game. No, he just stands on it. He does have the same barrages of attacks as before, but now a little bit easier to dodge, and overall, this is one of the better and more fun of fights of the game, even bringing his own ride armor mech to who support him out. I really like this fight, and it's such an enjoyable feat, and this is what brings Vile so up. Good backstory, good history, his vengeance for hate, his awesome boss fights. It's definitely one of the more enjoyable villain fights in the series, and there's one scene between him and Zero in this game that is actually really good.
Don't you ever get tired of the whole justice thing?
Don't you ever get tired of being Sigma's lapdog?
Now, what could possibly top this guy? Well, by process of elimination, you could take a guess who is much. The finale of X8. You have traversed your way through the moon. You have traversed your way to finally confront Sigma again in a devil-looking form. This time, it's business. Sigma had enough of meeting you, and so have you. You've dealt with this guy for so long, and you have finally come to bring an end to his insanity and madness. Him ushering in a new age, rising his children, generations of new Reploids as his own for world domination. He prefers to take control of the moon so that way he has a higher power. But you can't let him get away with this. Now you finally have one final duel against Sigma. This is the second best Sigma fight in the series. He'll bring out a sort of rings to try to attack you, then use his blade to try to hit you. Once you reach that certain point of health, you have to use your teammate to break out of it, or watch this dialogue that happens right here. But you're not gonna let his insanity take control of you completely. The fight gets more serious once he starts teleporting around, sending out different ring barrages, and cause fire eruption on the wall, and teleporting all over the place. This is one of the toughest Sigma fights, but easily the second best, and I really love this fight so much. And that's what I applaud it for. But wait, didn't I just talk about Sigma 2 parts ago? How come he's talked about again? Well, in case you didn't know, even after beating him, you finally get revealed the true twist villain, Lumine. And his fight is glorious. Lumine has set up an entire plan, using the Jacobs project, the whole entire elevator, as a plan to create all these different copy chips and making a new generation of old Reploids to outclass the new ones, as for world domination. But this is much more serious, and really shows his true power. Just using Sigma against his own will, and just completely out of nowhere, like it was so unexpected from him at this point. You thought that he was just a simple person who was working on this project for the greater good, but no. This is used for another new war, something much more deeper. His whole entire power and possession of waging another war to wipe out all of the humans and completely destroy Earth forever. Basically, this plot reminds me of Lost Planet 1. Same plot with Nevik trying to do the same thing. I guess that's where I get the idea from. And you wanna know what's funny about those two games? Both made by Capcom. You sleazy sly dogs. Therefore, this is where we get greeted with the best finale. And that's something X8 did much better over Lost Planet 1. Its final boss. Lumine will take control of power of these Chaos Emeralds, the different spirits of the Mavericks you face, and use them for different arsenals of attacks. He's basically using every single attack power to try to stop you. He has plenty of health to cycle through all the attacks, but make sure that you don't go through all of them too quickly. He will barrage you, with all these different types of attacks that you've already faced before, special powers from the Mavericks. And it's really, really good. Music is great as well, and it really shows that he can take possession of full power under his own control and will. Just something that I've never seen from a final boss fight, and it's definitely a spectacle that I appreciate. But then, there's Phase 2, where he brings in this more angelic look. I wonder what boss got inspired by this. And this time, it becomes much more epic. Cool looking background, the amazing music, the hard and frantic fight of different barrages of attacks. Lasers, spikes, everything charging towards you, you name it. In fact, he can even reverse his own attacks, making it much more tricky to avoid. This fight becomes a true testament of your challenge to see if you can survive through all of the fights in one go. Make sure to have all your characters here because you don't get to regenerate your health. This time, it's serious business around here. I just really loved how amazing and epic this battle is. Sure, I prefer Dr. Weil, but still, this is one of the best finales in the world. After draining him to very low health, he will try to protect himself and shield himself to completely prevent you from trying to destroy him. Now you have to be quick because he's on his last feet. And you're not just gonna let him get away with that. No, barrage him with everything you have. And that will finally finish him completely. This is what I loved about this fight and this character. The out-of-nowhere twist, the secret of it all, the true plan, the whole testament, even out-twisting the twist villain that's been responsible for the entire series. And that to me is why Lumine is one of the best villains in the entire franchise. And I applaud X8 for being one of the best finales in the series. Well, we've reached the end of the franchise. I hope you all enjoyed. What's your thoughts on this? Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know down in the comments below. In the meantime, thank you all for watching, and I'm glad you stuck around for this.